I want to tell you a story. Not a story about Maya is topic par professional thumbnail bna ka duthan. Revenge. Not a story about winning or losing. A story about what happens when the life you built turns out to be built on sand, and how a man found solid ground again. My name does not matter. What matters is what happened to me, because maybe it has happened to you too, or maybe it will happen to someone you love, and maybe this will help. I was married for 7 years. Her name I will not say either. Let us just call her my wife, because that is who she was, and that is the role I trusted her with completely. In the beginning everything felt right. We met in college, we dated for 3 years before we got married, and everyone around us said we were the couple who would last forever. We had inside jokes nobody else understood. We had a small apartment with a leaking tap we never fixed because fixing it became a joke between us. We had plans. A house near the coast. 2 kids. Maybe a dog. The kind of plans that feel so certain you stop questioning them. Looking back now, I can see the signs were there long before I let myself see them. The late nights at work that became later. The phone that was always face down on the table. The way she would step outside to take calls that used to come right in front of me. I noticed all of it. I just did not want to know what it meant. There is a strange thing that happens to a person when they suspect something is wrong in their marriage. Part of you wants proof, and part of you is terrified of finding it, because once you know, you cannot unknow it. I lived in that strange in-between place for almost 4 months. Telling myself I was imagining things. Telling myself I was being paranoid. Telling myself that 7 years of trust should outweigh a feeling in my gut. It did not. I found out the way most people find out. Not through some dramatic confrontation, not through hiring anyone to follow her, nothing like that. I found out because she left her laptop open one evening while she went to take a shower, and a message popped up on the screen that made my stomach drop in a way I had never felt before. I am not going to describe the details, because they do not matter, and because dwelling on the details is not what this story is about. What matters is that in that moment, the floor of my life opened up and I fell through it. I did not yell. I did not break anything. I sat on the edge of our bed for almost an hour before she came out of the bathroom, and when she did, I just looked at her and asked her to sit down. I want to be honest about something. In the days that followed, I felt a kind of anger I did not know I was capable of. I thought about saying terrible things. I thought about exposing her to everyone we knew. I thought about making her feel as small and as humiliated as I felt in that moment. Those thoughts are normal. If you are going through something like this, those thoughts will come to you too, and there is no shame in having them. But I want to tell you what I actually did, because the path I chose is the part of the story that matters. I chose to grieve instead of attack. That sounds strange, maybe even weak to some people. But grieving is not weakness. I had lost something real. 7 years of a life I believed in had ended in a single evening, and I needed to let myself feel that loss instead of immediately turning it into a war. I moved out within 2 weeks. Not because I wanted to punish her by leaving dramatically, but because I genuinely could not sleep in that apartment anymore. I stayed with a close friend for about a month while I figured out what came next. Those weeks were some of the hardest of my life. I would wake up at 3 in the morning replaying every conversation from the last few months, looking for the moment I should have known, the moment I should have asked the right question. I do not recommend doing this to yourself. It does not give you answers. It only gives you more pain. What helped me, eventually, was talking. Not to everyone. I did not want to turn my marriage into gossip for half the city. But I found one therapist, a quiet older man who had clearly heard 1,000 stories like mine, and every week I sat across from him and slowly unpacked what had happened. He never told me what to feel. He just helped me understand why I felt what I felt, and that alone changed everything. The divorce process itself took about 8 months. There were lawyers, there were documents, there were moments of frustration when things moved slower than I wanted them to. I will not pretend it was clean or simple. Divorce rarely is. But I made a decision early on that I was not going to use the legal process as a weapon. I was not going to drag things out to make her suffer, even though there were days I wanted to. I just wanted it to be over, fairly, so I could actually start rebuilding. Somewhere around month 5 of being on my own, something shifted in me. I remember the exact day. It was a Sunday morning, and I was making coffee in my new, much smaller apartment, and I caught myself humming. Just humming, for no reason, while waiting for the coffee to brew. And I realized I had not done that in over a year. Somewhere in the last stretch of my marriage, even before I knew about the affair, I had stopped humming. I had stopped doing a lot of small, unconscious things that come naturally to a person who is genuinely at peace. That Sunday morning was the first time I understood that what had happened to me, as painful as it was, had also removed me from a situation that was already quietly suffocating me before I even knew why. I started running again, something I used to love in college and had completely abandoned. I started cooking real meals instead of ordering food every night. I reconnected with 2 old friends I had drifted from during my marriage, not because my wife kept me from them, but because marriage and work and life had simply pulled my attention elsewhere. I started reading again. Small things. None of them dramatic. But each one was a brick, and slowly I was rebuilding a foundation that was actually mine. People often ask me if I ever confronted her family, or her friends, or made sure everyone in our circle knew what she did. The honest answer is no. Not out of forgiveness exactly, and not out of some saintly desire to protect her reputation either. I simply realized that spending my energy making sure other people judged her the way I judged her would not give me back a single day of those 7 years, and it would not make my own life any better. It would just keep me tied to her story instead of starting my own. That does not mean I pretended everything was fine. I told my closest family the truth, plainly, because they deserved to know why my marriage had ended, and because hiding it would have meant carrying the weight alone. But I did not turn it into a campaign. I let the truth exist quietly, and I focused on what came next for me. About a year and a half after the divorce was finalized, I changed jobs. It was something I had wanted to do for a long time but had kept putting off, partly because change felt risky and partly because, if I am honest, my old life did not leave much room for big personal risks. The new job was harder, paid better, and pushed me in ways my old comfortable role never had. I would not have made that jump if my old life had stayed intact. I do not say that to suggest the affair was some hidden blessing. It was not. It was a betrayal, and it hurt deeply, and I would not wish it on anyone. But I learned that pain and growth are not opposites. Sometimes they arrive in the same package. 2 years after everything happened, I ran into a mutual friend who told me, almost hesitantly, that my ex-wife's second relationship had also fallen apart, and that things were not easy for her either. I want to be completely honest with you about how I felt hearing that. For about 30 seconds, there was a small, ugly satisfaction in me, the part of me that still remembered the pain she caused. But that feeling faded fast, and what replaced it was something closer to indifference. Not coldness, just distance. Her life was no longer connected to mine, and that disconnection, that quiet indifference, was the real ending. Not a dramatic moment of triumph. Just the slow fading of relevance. That is what I mean when I say I got the last laugh, if you want to call it that. It was not a moment. It was not a single clever comeback or a public humiliation or some perfectly timed revelation. It was simply this. I built a life that worked without her in it. I became someone who could wake up on an ordinary Tuesday and feel content, not because of anything dramatic, but because the small pieces of my days were finally pieces I had chosen myself. If you are listening to this because you are going through something similar right now, I want to say a few things directly to you. First, what you are feeling is not weakness. The anger, the grief, the constant replaying of memories looking for clues, all of it is a normal response to a real loss. Do not let anyone rush you through it. Second, revenge feels powerful in your mind, but it rarely feels as good in reality as you imagine it will. The people who spend years trying to make an ex-partner suffer often end up more tied to that person than the ones who simply walked away and built something new. Third, rebuilding takes longer than you want it to. It is not a straight line. Some weeks you will feel strong, and then a random song or a familiar smell will pull you right back into the pain. That does not mean you are failing. That is simply how healing actually works. And finally, the version of your life that comes after this can genuinely be better, not because the betrayal was secretly a gift, but because you, the person living through it, get to decide what you build.